Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Well, kids, let's talk about some ways that you show people you love them. What's one way that you show people you love them?
Kissing them and hugging them.
Kissing and hugging them. That's a good way to show them.
And,
yes?
Wait, I don't want to do that.
You don't? Okay. So what about the people that we can't kiss and hug right now?
Yeah, I'm going to do that one.
Okay, you do that one.
So, we could call them up on our phones and say, "Hi, I hope you're having a good time at home. I have to stay at home too. I love you a lot."
That is a great idea. Yeah, being at home doesn't mean that we can't show people we love them, right? Because God still loves them and we still love them, so we still have to reach out. So if there are any kids out there watching, send us a note in the comments and let us know how you are reaching out to let people know that you still love them and God still loves them, even though you can't be with them right now. All right, thanks, kids. Our gospel for today is from John 11. I'm going to read select verses. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus. "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. What does the love of God look like right now? Well, showing up is an expression of love, right? The sisters, Mary and Martha, assume that if Jesus hears that Lazarus, one whom he loves, is ill, he will show up and he will intervene to heal Lazarus. That would be an obvious, loving gesture. Instead, he keeps his distance. Now, right now, we aren't even hitting the peak of COVID-19 cases in Minnesota yet, but churches remain closed to in-person gatherings. We are loving our neighbors by not having contact with them right now and further transmitting the virus. But Jesus was not responding to a pandemic. He waited to show up for his personal loved ones in order to better reveal God's glory. What in the world does that mean? Well, put simply, God's love is not just about you. For others to know God's glory, the undying love of God, we cannot be about only caring for our small circle of loved ones. In the American version of Christianity, which values the individual above all else, the message is often that you can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Won't that change your life? But in this key story foreshadowing Jesus' own death and resurrection days later, even the personal relationships of Jesus were not the primary way that God loves. There is a greater glory, The love of God for you is underneath, intertwined with, but bound to God's love for others. Jesus shows that love by waiting to show up for the ones who have specific claims on his attention. Wow. I don't know that I like that, but it also rings true. As a mom and a pastor right now, doing both while sheltering at home, I'm making some choices. So is my spouse, who leaves the house to care for his patients. So are so many of you who continue to go to work in essential roles. How are you showing that the love of God means caring for a wider group beyond your own closest loved ones? There's a witness for our time, people. Of course, many people have been living out this kind of prioritizing love long before this pandemic. And God's glory is revealed through their actions, whether anyone has named that or not. Two of the secular but incredibly relevant books that I would be waving at you from the pulpit if we were meeting in church today are, alas, in the pastor's office in that building. So I'll put links down in the comments below in case you want to see those books for yourself. The first one is called Revolutionary Mothering, and it is a collection of essays by mother activists, a lot about how their work for the wider community interacts with raising their own children. The second book is called We Live for the We, The Politics of Black Motherhood by Dani McClain, in which she talks about the struggles of wanting to shelter her daughter from racism and sexism, but also to enact her values by being in the thick of it to fight against those oppressions. God's mothering love does both and, nurtures individuals, but also puts the movement first. God shows through Jesus loving Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, but waiting, that God's love is for a much wider circle than just those we consider closest to us. God's intent is not for us to practice love for a small defined group, but that we would love those we do not even know above ourselves, like Jesus does. There are most certainly consequences for doing this. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So they said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Letting self-preservation of our family circle become overshadowed by God's love for all people is certainly a mark of the love of God among us. But so is falling apart, apparently. Jesus weeps, either from visiting Lazarus' body or in empathy with Mary's weeping and all those other mourners with her. Being overcome by our own grief and others' sorrow is a way that we show love. We may discipline ourselves to wait, to keep our distance for a greater purpose, but also at some point we are each going to come apart at the seams. Jesus does. And while it might feel like weakness or failure to us who are going through it, even when Jesus dissolves into tears, people can recognize this is what love looks like. Now later, Jesus goes to the tomb and he speaks directly to God, saying, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know that you have always heard me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of those who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. So maybe your trust in God is so strong that you could say with Jesus, "I know that you always hear me." Or maybe you are overcome like Mary right now and need prompting to get beyond what should have happened instead of what did happen. But know this: God's love for you and for all of your brothers and sisters and siblings who are part of humankind are made in the image of God. God is even more powerful than death, and God's love for you goes way beyond what we can fathom. Thanks be to God.